This week in IT, Microsoft announces changes to Windows 11 recovery. Windows 10 users are getting a respite, but there's a catch. A compact AI model is driving changes to the Windows 11 settings app, and Microsoft is struggling to sell Copilot to businesses. So stay tuned for all the latest. Welcome to the show where I talk about everything connected to Windows, Azure, and Microsoft 365. Microsoft has been talking a lot about the Windows Resiliency Initiative recently, and this was announced earlier this year, and it comes off the back of the huge outage that happened last year when a problem with CrowdStrike downed about 8.5 million PCs around the world and caused a whole lot of disruption and a lot of embarrassment for Microsoft. Now, we've talked about some of the changes Microsoft is planning to make to Windows 11 in 24H2 and the upcoming version of Windows that will be released later this year, including things like the quick machine recovery that's going to be added to Windows 11 very soon. But a little bit more information was released this week, and while Microsoft, as usual, just repeated a lot of the stuff that they'd already talked about, some of it already in preview since Ignite last year, so the end of 2024. They did add a few more details, and one of those things is that they're getting rid of the blue screen of death. They're replacing it with what you might call the black screen of death. Microsoft is saying that quick machine recovery will be available later this summer, and what it's essentially going to allow them to do is to provide remediations to devices that get stuck in recovery mode remotely and get them booted again without somebody having to physically see the device and come and actually do something. Of course, in a situation where you have a problem that's affecting thousands or even millions of PCs, Microsoft can provide some kind of remediation and get that hopefully remotely targeted to those devices that are having a problem to get them working again as quickly as possible. Microsoft says that is coming to Windows 11 24H2 devices later this summer, along with improved restart times where instead of having to wait a long time for the crash dump to be created that collects all of that information about the device, what went wrong, it can take quite a long time. Microsoft is saying now that for most users, when that kind of thing happens in the future, you'll be able to restart the device within 2 seconds and you should be able to get up and running again, and that the black screen of death is going to provide clearer information, a different user interface to provide information that's actually useful to the end user so they can get a better idea of what the problem actually is and communicate that to IT and hopefully get things working again much faster. If you've ever seen a blue screen of death, you know that quite often they have very cryptic error codes that are not always very helpful. Even to IT people who might understand them a bit better, you need to kind of do some research to try and really understand what the problem is. Hopefully Microsoft is going to improve that messaging, and hopefully we'll all be in a situation where when these kind of things happen, we'll actually be able to recover from them much faster and without any kind of interaction from an IT staff member. Microsoft also announced a couple of other things coming to the Windows Resilience Initiative. So something called Connected Cache. Now, I'm not sure whether this is entirely new. I think it was announced in preview at Ignite last year. There's already something called Connected Cache for Microsoft System Center Configuration Manager. So I think this is something different, something that works along the same principles. So essentially, if you need to update from Windows 10 to Windows 11, or you need to deploy Windows using Autopilot, or you need to apply an update, a cumulative update, instead of having to potentially go to a device that's on the internet somewhere, you'll have a device that can act as a cache, so it's like a server if you like, and your local devices will be able to access that device and pull updates from there rather than having to use internet bandwidth, for instance, so to get things updated much faster. Now, I'm not entirely clear how this differs from delivery optimization. I think it's going to use delivery optimization, but as I understood, delivery optimization can work, it can pull updates from other devices on the local network. How this connected cache really works differently from that, they don't seem to really be explaining that at this stage, but I guess we'll have to wait and see when this becomes available exactly how it works. They're also announcing an update to the universal print feature. So instead of having to select a printer in advance, you'll be able to basically send a print job to the print queue, and then at a later point you can just select the printer, and it's going to basically be a secure situation where you have a mobile app and you'll be able to use a QR code to essentially print from any device that you happen to be, physically close to. The idea being that you can use the Windows protected print infrastructure to get your documents securely printed to any device that you happen to be next to at the time. So that's really going to be something useful that you don't have to send to a particular device in advance when you want to print something. And of course, if you remember back to last week, they also announced Windows 365 Reserve, which, in the case that you lose a device or you really can't get your device rebooted after a big issue, you'll be able to essentially, for up to 10 days a year, be able to access a remote device on a completely new piece of hardware, get access to all your files and settings, get you back up and running very quickly with minimal interruption. Before we go on to the next story, I've got a quick favor to ask you. About 37% of the people who watched last week's video weren't subscribed to the channel. Now, as we go live today, we're on about 12,730 subscribers. I'd love it if we could push that up to 12,800 this week. So if you'd like to see these weekly news roundups from Petri.com, please subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the bell notification to make sure that you don't miss out on the latest uploads. This is a bit of a strange one, and this story has been going around the internet in the last week. So Windows 10 users are going to have a way when Windows 10 reaches end of life in October this year to get extended security updates for free. Now, I guess this is more for devices that are in a consumer situation or unmanaged. So Microsoft is saying if you sign up for the Windows backup app, so if you're prepared to sign into Windows with a Microsoft account, have your settings synchronized to the Windows backup app. We talked about this on This Week in IT a few weeks ago, essentially making it easier for organizations to migrate users from Windows 10 to Windows 11. And Microsoft is saying if you want to use this system, you're going to get your extended security updates for Windows 10 for the first year. So they're giving you a little bit of a respite, not having to upgrade to Windows 11 straight away, but there's a catch. I came across this story this week and it's quite interesting, and I want to dig a little bit more into all the things Microsoft is doing with AI in Windows. I know it's been a little bit controversial. We've only just seen the big flagship feature that Microsoft wanted to be the main driver for people to move to Copilot PCs, Copilot Plus PCs, and that is Windows Recall. That's only just come out of testing, so I haven't had much feedback on how that works, how that new system is. I hope to get my hands on it at some point over the next couple of months, and I'll give you an update on that. But Microsoft announced that they were working, or they've, I suppose, completed, and it's now in testing in the dev channel for Windows Insiders, a new system that is going to allow users to be able to use natural language in the settings app to essentially make changes to their devices. So for instance, rather than having to either find by navigating through the UI or using the standard search, you'll be able to use natural language to do something like change the size of your mouse pointer. So you could say, my mouse pointer is too small, and it will go off and find the appropriate setting for you and allow you to change or make your mouse pointer bigger by just clicking a button, essentially. Now, all this is being enabled by an AI agent, and Microsoft announced this week that they'd actually developed a new AI model to make this possible. So this is going to run locally on Copilot Plus PCs, so it uses the neural processing unit in those devices. They developed this model especially for the settings app. It's called Mu or Mu, I don't know how to pronounce it. Mu, I suppose, don't know how to pronounce it correctly. And there are a whole load of requirements for this model that they decided they would have to achieve. So the goal was to create something that was fast and a responsive agent that seamlessly integrates into the existing search box in settings, but also requiring ultra low latency for a broad range of possible settings. So they wanted to meet, the memory and processing constraints of the NPUs in these Copilot Plus PC devices, and they fine-tuned the model to achieve a sub 500 millisecond response time and scaling to handle hundreds of potential settings inside the settings app. So I think this kind of thing is really useful. I think the killer feature of these devices going forward, and I've said this before, is going to be the ability to use natural language for search. They already have this now in Copilot PCs for Windows search. They have this now coming in for the dev channel, for the settings app. The settings app is interesting because obviously they've tried to copy something that's a bit more like an iPhone because people are used to using those devices. But, even on iOS, the settings app isn't that great in my opinion. It can be quite difficult sometimes to find the actual setting that you're looking for. And I think Microsoft is going along the right lines here with trying to develop an AI agent that will actually find the appropriate setting for you, because just using the standard search doesn't always work well in Windows. It doesn't always work well on iOS either. So Apple has the same issue, in my opinion, with their settings app. Just Microsoft is one step ahead, and Microsoft is one step ahead in most things AI related compared to Apple at this stage. So good on you, Microsoft. I can't wait to see how this works in practice. While we're talking about artificial intelligence, let's talk a little bit about Copilot and ChatGPT. There were various reports this week that Microsoft is struggling to sell Copilot, so that's the Microsoft 365 Copilot, to businesses. And while some very large organizations have come on board with Copilot, actual adoption in those organizations has proven to be very sluggish. The main problem? Well, guess what? Users prefer ChatGPT, even in organizations that have Copilot licenses. Now, I have to scratch my head a little bit about this. So if users prefer ChatGPT, that means that they're not really taking advantage of all the integrations that you have with all the data in your Microsoft 365 tenant and Copilot. Because if you want to use ChatGPT, unless some kind of link has been established between ChatGPT and your Microsoft 365 tenant, I don't know whether that's possible to do. It could be. Let me know in the comments below. Then, you're going to have to basically find individual bits of information or individual files, dump them into ChatGPT before it can do anything useful for you. Or it means that users are essentially not really using those capabilities within ChatGPT and just asking simple questions and getting back answers. I'm not quite sure which of those two things is the problem. But I do understand that the Microsoft 365 Copilot is something that maybe I'm not also using very much. I'm using ChatGPT. I have a subscription to that. I'm also using the Copilot application that's built into Windows, which doesn't connect to Microsoft 365 at this stage. You can log into it, but only with a personal Microsoft account, so it doesn't have access to any of my corporate data. I find that a little bit strange, why I can't use that Copilot app that's built into Windows with Microsoft 365 Copilot. Don't know. Well, okay. And Microsoft did something interesting recently. The Office homepage, the Microsoft 365 homepage, is now essentially the Copilot app. I find actually that's a little bit frustrating. When I go to that page, what I want is access to the list of apps. And Copilot should just be one of those apps. I don't want to be taken straight to Copilot, then have to dig around trying to find other apps. Maybe that's just my workflow. So that change that Microsoft made to the Microsoft 365 homepage, at least for me personally, hasn't increased my usage of Copilot in Microsoft 365. I'm not quite sure what the issue is. I think it's the way people are using AI at the moment isn't very sophisticated. I think that access to Copilot in Microsoft 365 needs to be changed somehow. It needs to be brought into Windows. People need to be educated about the advantages of using Microsoft 365 Copilot and why they would do it over using ChatGPT. But it seems at the moment that users don't see a huge amount of benefit from the integrations that Copilot has with the Microsoft 365 data, so we'll have to see how that goes in the future. And of course, all this stuff that Microsoft is doing with agents, I'll ask the question again, how many organizations, when all of that stuff is fully available, are really going to be able to utilize it? It requires a whole set of skills. I think it's going to be many years before corporations are really able to benefit from that technology. And in the meantime, Microsoft needs to find a way to prize people away from ChatGPT. Of course, ChatGPT got there first. That's also part of the problem. But Microsoft needs to give users a compelling, clear reason to use Copilot in Microsoft 365, and clearly it's not quite there yet. If you found this video useful, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up, because it helps get the videos seen by more people on YouTube. In the meantime, I'm going to leave you with another video where I talk in more detail about Windows 365 Reserve, so do check that out. But that's it for this week, and I'll see you next time.